Hello, friends. I hope that all of you mamas had a great Mother's Day. I have part two of our Mother's Day series for you today. Part one, last week, I had Antrice Rowe share about how to help your young children make good decisions. And today I have a guest, Michelle Croyle, who has three adult children, and she is sharing on how to help your adult children make decisions without overstepping your bounds. So, how to find that balance of guiding them, giving your advice and your input without being dominating over them or making them push away so that they stop asking for your advice or communicating or coming to you. So, if you are a mom of young ones, there is still a lot of goodness in this episode for you. We do talk somewhat about younger kids because the foundation starts now when you have the young kids of setting yourself up for a future with communicating well and guiding your kids when they're adults. And if you have adult children already and feel like you've maybe already overstepped your bounds or your kids just won't listen to you, Michelle gives some advice for you. So tune in to this episode on helping your adult children make decisions.
Welcome to the Anchored Decision Show. I'm your host, Lauren Black, the world's biggest overthinker turned decision coach, all by the grace of God. Now I'm on a mission to help you make easier decisions, discover God's will, and live with purpose. Tune in weekly to hear real-life decision stories, expert insights, and faith-based strategies to help you navigate your decisions with confidence. So ditch your pros and cons list and learn to make better decisions without asking your mom or losing another night of sleep. Let's go. All right, friends, so we are back, and I am very excited for this conversation today with Michelle Croyle. She is a licensed professional counselor and the founder of Abundant Freedom Counseling, her private practice in Pittsburgh. She specializes in treating Christian women suffering from trauma and anxiety. Michelle is also the founder of Mental Health for Christian Women, which includes the Mental Health for Christian Women podcast, a growing membership community and a hub for mental health resources. And she can be found at mentalhealthforchristianwomen.com. So today I wanted Michelle to come on to share about a topic that I have zero experience in. And this is how to help your adult children make decisions without overstepping. And I know that a lot of my audience is younger moms, younger women. So I think we could benefit by being kind of on the receiving end of that, of how we could be receptive to our parents giving us advice on things. And then also just, we always have things we can learn and kind of set aside for the future. So welcome, Michelle.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah,
I love your podcast.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah. I was listening in a bit.
Oh, that's awesome. So, all right, well, let's dive in. So, Michelle, as a parent, how can you strike a balance between offering guidance and allowing your children, your adult children, to make their own decisions without overstepping?
Yeah, so a couple of things there. First of all, it doesn't just happen when they're adults. So, since your audience is more in the younger parenting realm, the biggest advice that I can give is to be developmentally appropriate and set the tone that you want the rest of your relationship to be like. And so if you want it to be a relationship that's mutually respectful, start setting the tone now. Don't be screaming and yelling. Model how you want communication to be handled. Model reflective listening. Model saying yes rather than no. That was a big thing my husband and I determined before we got married, before we had kids. And then we had to say, is this still something we want to do at different places? Where extreme hair colors or tattoos or whatever came into the picture. But when you can say yes and only say no for reasons of sin or safety is how we did it. Sin or safety are the only reasons that we would say no. Or if there was just something that we had to really share, hey, this is something that just isn't quite going to work for this reason or whatever, we would bring that to them so that when we ever did have to say no, we weren't exasperating them, always just defaulting. I think parents often default to no. And if instead you start as right where you are, whatever age your kids are, and just really see them. Don't make them into who you want them to be. Let them be who God made them to be. And then see how they need you to meet their needs. So I have three kids. My oldest is 25, my middle is 22, and my youngest is 19. And they are all individually gifted and individually unique. And I have different relationships with each of them. Even though I'm the same mom and the standards are the same, they each know me a little bit differently, but then they can all kind of talk with each other about, oh, that's mom, you know. And so there's something valuable about each of us being seen as who we are. So my encouragement would be to see your kids as who they are while they're young, show them the modeling of the respectful relationship, the give and take, the listening to understand, and the going for the win-win, those kinds of things. And then when they get older, they have that template to fall back on in their own intimate relationships and their friendships, and especially with you. So it's not so much about at that point allowing, because it's not our job once they reach adulthood to allow. It's more to continue the relationship that already set the tone.
Oh, I love that. So, yes, it definitely, even though a lot of my audience has younger kids, it is so applicable to be able to start this now. So, I am very happy to have you on sharing this.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And thank you for sharing about your kids. I meant to ask you about your kids. And are they all out of the nest? Do you still have some under your roof?
Well, so we have a blessing in that we ended up taking in an aunt of my husband years ago when she needed housing as she got older. And she put a kitchen into our finished basement. So we have an apartment that my son is there and he's now engaged. My middle daughter is still in college. And so she's home, but she's not. We're basically a dorm. And my youngest actually got married, and she's been married over a year, very happily so, wonderful Christian guy, but she's 19 and got married. And I didn't see that coming. I knew that they were friends for years. I knew that this was a God thing. I knew he was a hard worker and treated her really well and respectfully. And that at 16, when she was in the throes of like really dating him, the one thing, you know, how everybody in teenagehood has these insecurities and such, the one thing she never wavered on is, I'm going to be his wife. Like she just knew she had this peace. They went to church together. They treated each other well. And my husband and I are pre-marriage mentors. And so for years, you know, we've watched couples, and it doesn't matter how old you are. It's if you have these respectful, again, it's the same thing. How would you want to be treated? Am I speaking the truth in love? Am I listening to understand? Am I connecting? Are we looking for the win-win? Are we sharing our needs and hopes? Like there's just these basic respect things that we're not taught in school. I mean, unless, you know, like my kids were homeschooled and sometimes they're not taught that either. But I know intentionally that was one of the reasons that we did it, because we wanted more to the character development than we did just the curriculum. And there's nothing wrong either way. So please don't let anybody ever shame you if you homeschool, or shame you if you public school, or shame you if you private school. You have to do you for your family, because your kids and you are unique and God has called you to that. But the cool thing about being able to know that we instilled this stuff is that when we got to a certain place, which was her senior year of high school, I thought that she was going to go to college. I thought I had 4 more years of parenting to go. And we kept butting heads, and I couldn't figure out why we were butting heads. And it's because she was ready to fly. And this was her next thing. And then she already had a plan. She was going to still go to school. She is right now. She's in realtor school, and he's moving up the ranks into a management at his job. And like, there's so much going on. But I didn't plan it that way. In my head, I had a different template that, okay, my youngest will be the last to launch and leave the house. She was the first to leave the house. Everybody did it differently. And what we had raised them for all along was follow God's path for your life. So if we had come in and said, you can't do that now, it would have been anti our right, because she had already right before she got married reached 18. Second, we had an honest heart-to-heart discussion, and she said, Mom, you've taught me all of these things already. Like it's my turn basically. And instead of the reflexive thing that I think a lot of parents might have done, which is I'll show you, there's still more, blah, blah, blah. You don't know everything. You're 18, like that kind of tirade that people do sometimes. It was, you know what? She's absolutely right. I need to stand down and realize this is what she was raised for, to have a voice of her own, to make her own choices, to follow God, to love another person, to be loved by somebody else. I mean, there are so many good things here that it's not my place to step in. I need to just back out of the way and let God do God's thing and let her make her decisions now. And she made it clear, and I went, understood. Happy to put myself here if you need me, because, it still is a pretty young age to launch. And she's like, I'll need you. And she'll call me when there's stuff like, hey, so adult question here. What do I do with a dead roadkill deer that's outside my apartment? And I'm like, well, what if you call this? Okay, why? I thought about that and I thought about this. Yeah, that's it. Or what do you do about this insurance bill? Because it's confusing. I'm like, anytime you want to call, you call. And so I just welcome that. But it's really a continuation. And each point of the way, you have to check yourself. If you really want to be a good parent, you have to check yourself and ask yourself, why am I saying what I'm saying? Is it a preconceived notion? Is it what other people will think? Is it because I think it should look this way? Like, I don't know, my parents did it that way, or that's what I heard somewhere or saw on a television show. And really know why you're doing what you're doing before you make the rules. Because a lot of rules are just there to rebel against. And if instead you take that off the table and you just say, hey, I want to know you. I want to know your heart. And I'm raising you while I'm modeling self-regulation, listening, respectful, back and forth, understanding and seeking the win-win as much as possible. Then we don't have to even go down those paths, because there's a lot of decisions that we don't even have to make for you. You raise your kids in the Lord. I said that was the one thing we got right. Two things we got right. One, we gave our kids the opportunity and the environment to follow Jesus. And two, we just loved them. And that was it. And we said yes. So there's our three. And four is we had fun. We spent time together and we had fun. Everything else just worked out. It doesn't mean that different kids at different stages didn't have different struggles and the normal things of growing up, but we always had a baseline to come back to. And when you have that solid, I'm always loved here, I'm always safe here. And you know what? If they're not pushing their will on me, then maybe I can actually listen to it. Maybe I can actually go ask for help when I need it, rather than roll my eyes and say, oh, that's mom,
Yeah.
or dad or whatever.
I love that. It sounds like you have great communication with your kids. They feel willing to open up to you. So how can others facilitate that in their life and make sure their kids are in good communication with their parents?
Yeah. And I think that really comes down to listening without correcting, without judging. Now, I don't mean you don't correct behaviors. I mean, you don't correct feelings. You don't correct thoughts. You correct behaviors. So, hey, that's not really nice of you to hit your sibling, right? At the younger ages or whatever. I hear people in counseling as they're there with their young kids and stuff, and things like, don't bite her, or share, or yes, you can have a snack, but parents have to do that kind of stuff. I mean, that's normal, but don't bite her because it hurts her. You know, you can have a snack, but let's eat something nutritious first. You're helping model good decision making and explaining it in a way that is developmentally appropriate, so that then they can go, oh, that's the way we do life, the easiest way. It's just like God with his word, right? He gives us the whole Bible and the whole word of God. And yet people are like, yeah, okay, well, that's a book. And it's like, well, it works when you use it, works when you do what God put into place. And that's the same with parenting. You can't guarantee that your kids aren't going to do their own thing as they get older, and they will do their own thing. But is it do their own thing because they continue in the way they should go, meaning how God made them, and because they have a compass that they agreed with you because you explained to them with wisdom, not with force and control, how to make these decisions. So it's not really allowing them to make choices. It's more allowing yourself to sit in the space and noticing how you can be the most helpful in the relationship to what the goal is. Growing together, spending time together, encouraging them, answering their questions. And then as they get older, it's waiting for them to ask you for the help or saying, hey, there's something here. Like if there's something I'm noticing that I just want to point out, I honestly will say, look, you're an adult. You can do what you want. Just something that I would like to say because I am your mom. Take it or leave it. It's okay. I love you anyhow. You're great. Just one piece of thing in case it helps. Here's something I'm seeing. And my kids let me do that. Now, I don't know if internally, depending on the thing, there might be oh, okay, fine. But in reality, we're all going to be human and we're all going to kind of irritate each other from time to time anyhow. This is probably the least offensive way to do it. And same with the kids. They do things and sometimes I might cringe like, mom, why are you wearing that? Well, it's comfortable, or something like that. So it's like a friendship and people say, don't be friends with your kids, be their parent. I think be their parent and be their friend because Jesus is a friend and he is our loving father. So I kind of push back on the fact that you can't be their friend. If you don't have a connection that's a real relationship, you're not going to have a connection that they're going to want you to speak into their lives.
Yeah. I like that Andy Stanley, I don't know if you're familiar with him,
Yeah,
Andy and
yeah.
Sandra. I've read some of their books, and one of their books on parenting, they talk about how in the earlier stages, that's when you're kind of the coach or you're the encourager. And then the friendship stage, quote unquote, is when they are adults. And that's when you've done all the training, you've done the coaching, you've been there to support them. And now you can just reap the benefits of the relationship
Yeah.
you've built and have the friendship.
Yeah, that's how my husband looks at it too. It's like the coaching is the earlier part and it just dovetails nicely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think, yes, you want that great relationship with your kids, but that does mean sometimes drawing the line, setting a boundary.
Absolutely.
And that might not feel very friendly to especially younger kids. They don't understand at the
Yes.
time why you're drawing that boundary, why you're setting that
Yeah.
in place. You know that it's
And
for their good.
there's a time that's necessary. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There are times where we have to get their attention by having a stern voice and saying, no, that's not acceptable, or we're not going to do that. But what I'm kind of really hoping people get is oftentimes parents get so stressed that they end up screaming or they end up berating or they end up like just expectations that really are more about the parent controlling their stuff and managing their stuff than it is about the kid being bad. Kids are going to be kids, and that's why I say developmentally appropriate. So, yeah, it is going to be developmentally appropriate to set the framework. It is going to be developmentally appropriate to say, this is what's acceptable in this home. This is how we treat each other. This is how we act, how we go out into the world. This is what we do. Then naturally, well, why do we do that? Well, because, as Christian families, God has good for us and he promises good things for us, like long life when we obey our parents, when we listen, because he has good for us. How many people are taken out too soon because they didn't have parents who set those guidelines and rules.
Yeah.
And, so just like God does, here's the framework. As long as you stay within that framework, things are going to go pretty nicely for all of us.
Right.
If not, we're going to have a talk and I still am the parents, but then, once they're adults, it's a different situation where they get to make these choices and hopefully you taught them how to make wise choices.
Right. So, what would you say, though, to a parent who might have an adult child who's not making good choices, who's going down a hard road, and doesn't want to hear anything of what their parents have to say?
I think at that point, it's a really good time to focus on the fact that it's a journey. It's a point of a journey in their life. It's not their final destination. God he's not surprised by this. And you as a parent can continue seeking for God's intervention and miraculousness, maybe set up circumstances that allow other people to speak into their lives or whatever. But if they're just not listening or they're being hurtful and it's not okay, it's not acceptable, you have to do tough love things, just view it as a journey that they are at a certain place in their story and that God can still redeem that too. it's not the end of the story. And that makes me think like of Chuck Colson, and like he was back in the Watergate scandal stuff and went to prison. And then he came out and ended up being quite a minister for the Lord. Oftentimes, when my kids were in different youth groups and such, they'd hear pastors talking about all the hijinks they got into at earlier times in their life and such. And it almost started to seem like it was a requirement for pastors to have some really like interesting stuff in their background, not awful stuff, but interesting. And so it's going to all change. That's the one thing you count on in life is that, things change. And so if it's not good, it's not done yet.
Yeah, yeah, that's beautiful. So now, do you have any examples of how you've helped some of your adult children through a decision, either one they asked for your advice for or one that they didn't?
So pretty much what I've learned that makes all the difference is to only answer the questions that are actually being asked. If somebody just wants to vent, hear them emotion to emotion and just understand. If somebody wants help, then you say, okay, well, this is what I might do or what I might suggest, but you're going to have to obviously weigh that for yourself. Nobody likes their power of choice or their voice to be taken away from them. And so as long as we respect the fact that would I want someone telling me what to do in the way that I'm providing it, or would I like them to say, well, here's my take if you want it or if you've asked for it. But instead of jumping in, just being quiet and really listening. And I've found that that's not really me helping my kids as much. I mean, it is, but that's how I help them is by taking their mom out of the equation and just being a human to human connection. And then that allows them to be more receptive. It allows them to not have to kind of already do this back and forth. It's kind of natural because they're supposed to be breaking away and yet they still need some, you know, support in, it's nice to have people in your corner, right? So it's good that they want to come back to you. But if you can hold your tongue at that point, once they're adults, and just let them speak and then meet them emotion to emotion or give them possible things as you might see it and then leave it up to them. Leave the outcomes and the choices to them. You'll hear a lot more from them. They'll want to be around you a lot more, and then they will make their own choices. And whether or not they do it, it's not a commentary on you or how much you love them or how well you parented them. They're just an individual making choices, and God gave them that right. So, it's kind of like if we just get with the way that God designed it in the first place, that, okay, it's up to you to choose this day what you're going to do with it and what you're going to, do with your life and your choices and such. And then, okay, I don't know if I would do that, or, oh, that was really good. You did better than I would have done, or either would have been fine, or it was just a hard situation. No one knows what to do. We're all doing the best we can, whatever.
Yeah, yeah, that's
But
great.
just a lot of flexibility rather than, there was always that kind of, when I was growing up, children should be seen and not heard. And I'm like, why? Jesus said, let the little children come to me, and, don't let them look down on you because you're young. Like they're people too, and they have stuff to offer. And I know I did, and I'm sure you did. We all do, but we have to be seen as having something to offer and not squelch that in our kids.
Yeah, definitely give them that independence and sometimes let them learn the hard way.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, because you'll learn so much more and earn it and own it when you've done it. I was thinking with my youngest getting married earlier than I had anticipated. It's like, well, but she doesn't know this yet. And then I thought, well, how did I learn it? Well, once I got married and I started doing it, I wouldn't have learned it no matter what age I was, younger or older, until I did it. Like I didn't learn how to drive a car until I drove a car. So you kind of have to do that. And so she was old enough to get married. It's what God said to do. And I was like, oh yeah, she'll figure it out too. Like, what's the problem here? There's no problem here, you know? So I think your expectations are a big deal too. God has better plans than you can imagine for your kids and for you, but you can't over control such that you put yourself in the lowercase g God area. You need to let God be God, and that's it.
Yeah. Now, I know someone who she has adult children that are all married, and she was having a concern over one of her grandkids with their speech and feeling it was really delayed and that the child should get some speech therapy. And she didn't know how to approach her daughter in law or maybe her son on giving this advice because she's not with them all the time, but she does feel like, okay, this child's very behind. So she didn't really know how to approach it appropriately. And like,
Yeah.
does she just let it go? Does she bring it up to her son? Does she encourage her daughter-in-law's mom to be the one to bring it up? So what would your advice be there
Yeah.
for someone who's maybe an in-law?
I think it depends on the individuals involved. It depends on the type of relationship that the in-laws have with each other or the grandparents have with the parents or the other. There's so much to it that is nuanced based on who you're talking to. If someone has a personality disorder and they're a narcissist, you're just inviting insult. If you're being listened to and you do it with a respectful tone, I think that that's okay. I think you can really say anything, but how you say it, the heart behind it of I want only good and I will step back if this is not my place, but because it sort of is my place because I care and I love, is there something that would be okay for me to speak into? I think this might need a little bit of help here. I just want what's best. Is there any way that I can help you or would you like me to shut up? I often say that, like, do you like help here or would you like me to be quiet? You know, and sometimes even if they say, you know, just please don't, they're still hearing the fact that you in love reached out and tried. So I think it's just the tone of I just want to love you, and not make it a habit. So you don't constantly go in there and say, oh, here's what's wrong with your kid, and here's this, and you need to do that, and here I would do it this way, and you should have seen this. Like if that becomes the habit, then don't even try this because they're not going to listen anyhow. But if it's a one-off thing, because it's, again, save it for what really matters. Like we said, to say yes unless sin or safety, save these times where you kind of step a little bit into their space for times where it actually really seems like this is something that needs to be shared and then they can choose what to do with it.
Yeah, yeah.
But just do it with the right heart.
I think if everybody communicated like that, there'd be a lot more good in this world and stronger relationships in general because a lot of times we don't speak out because of fear of severing the relationship. When if we just spoke out in love and let them know, hey, exactly as you said, like I love you and I love whoever else is involved in this. And so if it's not my place, just let me know. But I wanted to bring it up anyway, just out of love.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I think, love covers a multitude of sins, right? And also wounds from a friend can be trusted. And I think that those verses really, the wounds from a friend can be trusted is a really good verse because it's like, that it's a safe wound. It may not feel the best, but you know that ultimately it's for your good. It's kind of like cleaning out a wound. And like if you cut yourself and cleaning it out may not feel so good, it might sting, but it's actually doing you a help.
Right. Yeah. So now what would you say for someone who maybe has kind of built up a bad relationship or something where their adult child just doesn't want to listen anymore because they've maybe overstepped in the past or they just butt heads, maybe a personality difference? How could they make amends to that so that they can be heard in the future?
Yeah, I think you can only start where you are. A lot of people spend a lot of time in regret or fear. So fear of the future, regret of the past. And I just say always start with the present. You have power today. Live today well. You have power tomorrow. Live tomorrow well. Like change, do the work, and just do that each day. That'll become your new history and that'll become the relationship. And that when they're ready, that, if you are a safe person, I think that kids naturally, like, I think it's just something God puts into us. I think that if kids feel safe with their parents, really safe, like heard, understood, respected, individuated as adults, there's nothing to rebel against. There's nothing to want to stay away from because you're only being like loved in action when you go back home. It all comes down to treating each other just with respectful love in whatever it is.
Yep. Yep. That's beautiful. So, all right. Well, I think we have really covered a lot here, and I appreciate you sharing all of this from your
Yeah,
perspective. And I loved the story of your daughter getting married at 18 or 19,
yeah,
and just how
yeah.
you let her make her own choices there. And
Yeah, yeah. It was, well, she would have, to be honest, I say this to my kids. I'm like, what did we do? We raised you to have your own minds, and then you went and had the nerve to do it, and to think for yourselves and all of that. So, it really wasn't my place at that point, but it was. And that's what made it tricky because these choices were being made right on the cusp of, actually, I still am responsible. Okay, maybe next week I'm not, or something like that. Like it was interesting, but they are doing a fabulous job. I couldn't be more proud of all three of my kids and the relationships that they have and how they show up in the world. And I learn from them all the time. And I think that that's another thing too, is it's not all about you teaching your kids. It's about God also refining us too. And I've learned so much by being the mom of these precious gifts. And the Lord really, his I think it's a reciprocal thing, as iron sharpens iron.
yeah, definitely. All right. So, Michelle, thank you so much for coming on, and let everyone know where they can find you online. And I believe you have a freebie for people.
Yeah, I do. So if you want to ask yourself the questions that might make you even more of an effective parent at any stage of the parenting game, I have a free download for you. And you can just email me at Michelle with two L's at mentalhealthforchristianwomen.com, and I'll be happy to get that right out to you. You can also follow the podcast, Mental Health for Christian Women, or go to mentalhealthforchristianwomen.com. But if you do want that cheat sheet of takeaway questions to kind of make sure that you're coming at things with a heart that's going to grow your relationship with your kids, just Michelle with two L's at mentalhealthforchristianwomen.com, and I'll be happy to send it out.
I love that. All right. So, as always, we end with rapid fire decision questions. So, let me know which one you would
I was
choose.
looking forward to this.
Oh,
This is so fun. I see these on YouTube and I just love them.
yeah. Okay,
Yep.
perfect. Picnic or restaurant?
Ooh, uh, picnic with food from a restaurant. Can you do that?
Oh, yeah.
Bring take out on a blanket outside.
Yeah. Spicy or mild?
Spicy.
Mountains or canyons?
Canyons.
Tea or hot chocolate?
Tea.
Antiques or modern decor?
Modern decor.
And DIY craft or cooking project?
DIY craft.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Michelle. This was great. And this concludes part 2 of my Mother's Day series. So happy Mother's Day, a little bit belated.
Happy Mother's Day. Yes.
So,
Happy Mother's Day
all right. We'll
to
see you later.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening all the way through. If you want more content on making intentional faith-based decisions, go through my playlist and download any relevant episodes. Hit subscribe so you never miss an episode, or head over to anchoreddecisions.com to find more decision-making resources. See you next week for another episode.